For those who have studied history and Bible prophecy, to say that the end is near is not an exaggerated statement or alarmism. Most Bible prophecies have been fulfilled, and there's just a few key ones remaining to come to pass, such as the kings of the earth giving their power to the beast, Revelation 17, and the image of the beast being finished so that it can enforce the mark of the beast, as in Revelation 13. I've discussed these things in countless places and in highly detailed and researched formats, and my personal conviction is that the world does not have that much longer. A decade, perhaps. If this is true, then many things are to be expected about our present day. Deception will be at a maximum, and so will apostasy. Yet according to Paul, this great falling away will have the appearance of godliness. See 2 Timothy 3 verse 5. This is important for many reasons, but one of them is that the final situation is one of counterfeit faith. As it was in the beginning with Cain and Abel, so will it be at the end. Indeed, God says he declared the end from the beginning in Isaiah 46, 8-11. Remember this and stand firm. Recall it to mind, you transgressors. Remember the former things of old, for I am God and there is no other. I am God and there is none like me, declaring the end from the beginning, and from ancient times things not yet done, saying, My counsel shall stand, and I will accomplish all my purpose. Calling a bird of prey from the east, the man of my counsel from a far country. I have spoken, and I will bring it to pass. I have purposed it, and I will do it. In this way, when God's people rested on the Sabbath, they acknowledged God's authority as the Creator and their provider. When they dealt honestly with others and loved their neighbor, they acknowledged that it was because God told them to do so, not because a worldly authority commanded them to do so. Sure, there are many societies throughout history that have had laws that intersect with the Ten Commandments, but the Bible warns that at the end we will be forced to choose between two lawgivers, God or the devil. The Roman Catholic Church has its own version of the Ten Commandments, and that version will be the one enforced upon the world very soon through Sunday legislation and Sunday sacredness propaganda. The second commandment on images has been removed from the Catholic version, and the final commandment on coveting has been split into two to make up the difference. The Sabbath has also been changed from the seventh day to the first day, moved from the fourth to the third position, and renamed the Lord's Day, which is a practice that began with Sylvester, Bishop of Rome, in 325 AD, shortly after Constantine rearranged the days of the week and proclaimed Sunday the day of rest for the empire, all of which are fulfillments of the little horn power changing the times and laws in Daniel 7, 8, and 11. So when there's going to be laws that mandate rest on Sunday and propagandize against Christians who refuse to follow in this counterfeit way of worship, you will be forced to choose between God or the devil as your lawgiver. Why? Because Revelation 13:2 says that Satan gave his throne and power and great authority to the papal institution at the head of the Catholic Church. In response to the communistic, atheistic paradigm that the world is now exiting, a world where Sunday rest is a regular thing for family and the environment seems like a completely good and rational idea. Yet it will be destruction for those who are deceived, because they will acknowledge Satan as their creator of a counterfeit golden age, as their redeemer, because they will not be shut out of society, and as their provider, because there will be many benefits for participating. This now brings us squarely in front of today's point. Rejection of the Sabbath is actually rejecting the Creator, which is why those who will take the mark will be destroyed. Just as somebody who would reject Jesus openly and suffer the consequences, so too will it be at the end of the age, where many will reject Christ by preferring the counterfeit, the almost right version. The Sabbath is therefore intimately tied to the gospel, because rejection of the Sabbath in our generation will mean rejection of Christ once Satan begins to exert his authority over the world and obtain worship. The Sabbath has always been a physical picture of God's ultimate rest, so those who will be shut out from society will have to trust in God to deliver them and provide for them as he always has, while those who prefer the world as their redeemer and provider will experience sudden destruction when they cry peace and safety. In the Old Testament, one of the chief complaints of God against Israel was that they profaned his holy day. People rejected God by rejecting the rest that he provided, which was ultimately a picture of rejecting Christ and rejecting salvation. That is why Israel was often judged on a Sabbath, For example, both temple judgments happened on Sabbaths, which is an important picture that the Sabbath represents life and safety and protection for those who are aligned with God, while total and brutal destruction for those who reject his rest. This is also seen in other judgments, like the flood or Jericho, and I've discussed how there is great evidence to believe that Jesus' return will also be on a Sabbath. Because the final judgment cannot be divorced from the gospel, this adds yet another important thread to the relationship between the Sabbath and the good news. After all, why is it called the good news? Because the bad news is that God is just and all-powerful, and he has scheduled a time to display that justice in total sovereignty over the world. This is really bad news, but that is why the cross of Christ is such good news. But if Jesus will visit the world on a Sabbath and deliver those who are faithful while condemning those who rejected him, the Sabbath becomes a weekly placeholder for God's people to remember the gospel and to look up, especially as the events of the Bible come to pass. Just as the last day of the week is the Sabbath, the last day of history will very likely be a Sabbath, and that means as the world gets crazier, each Sabbath for those who believe becomes increasingly more meaningful and restful. What a delight and gift indeed. So you see, my friend, the Sabbath and the gospel are intimately related. The Sabbath is the physical expression of our spiritual rest in God through Jesus Christ. It was not done away with, but rather fulfilled. That doesn't mean that it was obeyed by Jesus perfectly, so it no longer stands as a part of God's intended morality for humankind. No, rather it means that its meaning has been made full, or fully revealed to humanity. We now have the fullest meaning of the Sabbath, something that the Israelites thousands of years ago had no way to understand. And because of the cross, we can truly enjoy it as a delight without drifting into legalistic burdens like modern Jews or legalistic sects do today. Learn then the truth about the Sabbath and edify yourself with the truth of history and Bible prophecy. In this way, you can interpret current events and understand the trajectory of history, something that most people are ignorant of. And because most erroneously believe that the Sabbath is just for the Jews, or that it's been done away with or spiritualized, they will be easy fodder for the beast to obtain worship through the counterfeit system that is soon coming. Throughout the book of Revelation, it describes the faithful as those who have the testimony of Jesus and keep the commandments of God. That's very important. That doesn't mean the book of Revelation is contradicting everything that you've learned in the New Testament about salvation. It means that those who truly have faith will show it in a new life with new works and obedience. We don't obey in order to be saved. We obey because we are saved. In the new covenant announced in Ezekiel 36 and Jeremiah 31, God says that he will make us obey by giving us his Spirit, so that we can walk in his ways. Why? Because the moral law is good. It's perfect, just like God, because it's a reflection of God's character. So, it's a good thing to obey the law, but we're not able to obey it perfectly, which is why we need a Savior. Yet, the law is still there, not as a schoolmaster anymore, because we've come to Christ, nor as an alternate door like the legalists have espoused, but rather a guide and a mirror. Peter tells us to confirm our election in 2 Peter 1 verse 10, and how we do that is by genuinely evaluating the fruits of our faith. If God has given you a great gift that means a lot to him, and it is for your good and also enjoyable, and you reject this gift, what does that say about your faith? In the beginning, mankind entered reality through the Sabbath, and this was by design, to show that though there are reprobate who will be destroyed, man himself will be saved. And because God resting on the seventh day was a picture of Jesus resting in the tomb on the seventh day, God resting with Adam and Eve on the first Sabbath was a picture of the gospel from the very beginning of creation, a picture that will be fulfilled on the last Sabbath, which will be Judgment Day. Soon after resting with God in paradise, Adam and Eve fell and the story of redemption began. In poetic fashion, we see a return to the Garden of Eden at the very end of Revelation, and the entrance of humanity into God's eternal rest. Yet, before this rest lies the final challenge. Just as Adam and Eve were tempted with something seductive that led them away from the true God, so will the test be before the judgment, a seduction of something that seems good to the eyes and very reasonable. Remember that having discernment is not knowing the difference between good and evil. Everybody should know that. Rather, it's knowing to tell the difference between right and almost right. Antichrist in the Bible has two meanings: openly against Christ and in place of Christ. Rejection of Jesus is not just allotted for stubborn Jews or atheists or pagans. These things are passing away. The majority of the rejection will actually be because of preferring the seductive in place of version that is almost right. The counterfeit Christ of religion, the counterfeit lawgiver, which is the Roman Catholic papacy. Those without big ears will make the worst decision of their lives, so do not be one of them, but instead learn the truth on this very important issue. May God grant you understanding, courage, and peace in the months and years to come.